Breaking news this Tuesday, Donald Trump indicted again. The new charges against the former American president and what it means for his bid to win back the White House. Firefighters without borders.
Hopefully this is an agreement that stays forever.
Neetu Garcha is with the American and Mexican crews helping Canadians fight wildfires. Canada's bold new way to get smokers to butt out.
A warning on every cigarette can't be missed.
The other addiction the government is being urged to crack down on next. And forget flying cars, how about an underwater one?
Good luck, fellas.
The deep sea drive, hoping for a route into the record books.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin with breaking news. Former U.S. President Donald Trump has been indicted by a federal grand jury, part of special counsel Jack Smith's investigation into Trump's efforts to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election and attempting to prevent the peaceful transfer of power to Joe Biden. Jackson Proskow is following this. Jackson, do we know what's in this indictment?
Hi, Donna. The charges include conspiracy to defraud the United States, conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, and conspiracy against rights. The 45-page-long indictment also mentions 6 co-conspirators, although they aren't named at this point. Essentially, the allegation here is of a widespread campaign to knowingly spread lies about the election results, then use those lies to deploy fake slates of electors, to pressure state officials to ignore the will of voters, and to use the Justice Department to try and run sham investigations into the election. Ultimately, that effort culminated with a plot to enlist the vice president based on those lies in that ultimately failed effort to overturn the results on January 6th, which, as we know, turned violent.
The attack on our nation's capital on January 6th, 2021, was an unprecedented assault on the seat of American democracy. As described in the indictment, it was fueled by lies. Lies by the defendant targeted at obstructing a bedrock function of the U.S. government.
Jackson, Trump has already called this indictment fake before it even came out. He's been indicted before, of course. He's still running for president in 2024. Will this make any difference?
Well, you know, he's expected to make his first court appearance on Thursday and will likely use that to actually build on his base of support. Some polling out just in the past couple days here shows that he is almost 40 percentage points ahead of his closest Republican rival when it comes to fighting for the party's presidential nomination. And Donna, this one is remarkable. In a head-to-head hypothetical matchup against Joe Biden, both men are tied at 43% support. Despite all his legal troubles, he is on path to potentially becoming president once again in 24.
Long way to go till that election. Jackson Proskow in Washington, thanks. August is off to a hot and dangerous start, and many Canadians are on edge about wildfires. More than 1,000 fires are burning across this country. 646 are out of control. This summer has already been the worst fire season in Canada, and it's not over. To help, the federal government has called in more than 2,000 firefighters from multiple countries. You remember this group. They are from South Africa. They landed in Edmonton back in June, a welcome show of international solidarity to relieve exhausted local crews. In BC, the government has requested 1,000 international firefighters. Crews from Australia, Brazil, Mexico, and the U.S. are already there, many taking on one of BC's largest fires near Kamloops. Our Neetu Garcha got exclusive access to some of them working the front lines. Neetu.
Donna, we heard from some of these firefighters behind me who are from the U.S. and Mexico, and they highlight how they're picking up on new knowledge to take back home for their wildfires, and also how they bring with them unique techniques to BC. And we got an inside look at some of them.
You got some more family days, right?
Our specialty is getting water to an incident and plumbing that incident with hose.
California firefighter Michael Piper's first time in Canada is with his 5-person engine crew, bringing with them several 600-gallon fire trucks from the Golden State, which is experiencing its slowest start to the season in decades.
Weirdly enough, we had a wet winter, finally not a drought, and so it's prolonged the season, so it allowed us the opportunity to come up here It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for us, and we're super excited to be here.
We are honored to be here. It's amazing. Some of the first engines, strike teams that can just drive through the border and come assist on this, and hopefully this is an agreement that stays like forever.
Their support on the Rossmore fire, about 10 kilometres south of the city of Kamloops, helps relieve exhausted local crews. The blaze is among the largest in BC, burning near a big urban centre.
BC Wildfire Service officials say this controlled burn began with a technique first introduced in this province by Mexican firefighters, using a machete to keep the flames out of the tree canopy.
It's a key and special weapon used against the wildfires, according to Jessica Espinosa, speaking through a translator.
What she's particularly proud of is the use of the machete, which is a traditional firefighting tool that the Mexicans use back home.
2 Griffin helicopters and 17 military members from Alberta have also arrived to support BC crews.
Until you see it from the air, you don't really get an appreciation for just how rugged the terrain is out here.
We're really being put to the test.
With climate experts predicting even more severe wildfire seasons more often, these foreign crews say working together like this is more important than ever.
The biggest concern now is hot, dry and windy conditions forecast over the coming days, which are expected to increase the fire behavior here. Donna?
Okay, Neetu near Kamloops, BC tonight, thanks. Further south in BC, there's some relief for people in the popular tourist town of Osoyoos. A change in the wind direction has helped crews there working to contain a fast-moving fire, and hundreds of people have been able to return to their homes. Heather Yourex-West is in Osoyoos, where everyone is keeping an eye on those winds. Heather.
Donna, the Eagle Bluff wildfire has grown considerably from 1,400 to more than 3,000 hectares in the last 24 hours. While most of that growth has been on the side opposite of Osoyoos, some of that growth has been towards the town as well. Still, the immediate fire danger has decreased enough that most of those who were forced from their communities have been able to return to their homes.
Things are back on par at the Osoyoos Golf Club. But at the end of this driving range, you can see just how close this neighborhood came to disaster.
Very scary. I guess if the wind had been more powerful or something along those lines and it started to catch the odd house, could have been very bad.
Welcome home.
Hundreds of residents were allowed to return home Monday afternoon. Though by later that day, flare-ups on the hillside made clear why an evacuation alert was still in place.
We've got everything packed. All we have to do is load it in the vehicle and head out again. And we've got the reservation at the hotel.
Though most evacuation orders and a number of alerts have been rescinded, the Eagle Bluff fire grows, nearly doubling its size since Monday.
A majority of the activity that we have been seeing is along the west flank and the northwest corner of the wildfire. So that's due to the winds that we're seeing in the area and the fuel types.
It means fire crews are gearing up for a lengthy fight.
And tonight you guys have fresh stew, we're going to have some chicken, all that stuff.
In a show of appreciation, local business owners have been working around the clock to keep the many fighting this blaze well fed.
Before we knew it, our wonderful community started sending money and e-transfers and cash donations and salads, and it kind of just exploded from there. Within less than 24 hours, we've raised about $7,000. We've been cooking nonstop.
Several businesses remain under an evacuation order as the hill above them continues to burn. Fire crews remain in the area building fire breaks with the support of 6 helicopters. A reminder that this fire is still very much a threat. Donna?
All right, Heather Yourex-West in Osoyoos, BC, thanks. That stifling heat in Phoenix, Arizona has finally eased a little. It was down to 42 degrees on Monday, and that was just enough to end the city's record-shattering streak of 31 straight days of temperatures at or above 43 degrees. More extreme heat is expected to return tomorrow, though. The average temperature in Phoenix in July was a blistering 39 degrees, the hottest month ever in an American city. In Australia, police have charged a former childcare worker with hundreds of sex crimes against children. The details are disturbing, and police acknowledge the details will be deeply distressing for the families of the children.
Today, I can outline the details of Operation Tenterfield, an investigation that has led to a former childcare worker being charged with 1,623 child abuse offences against 91 children, including 136 counts of rape and 110 counts of sexual intercourse with a child under 10.
Investigators allege the 45-year-old recorded the offences on phones and cameras over a 15-year period while working at a dozen childcare centres in Sydney, Brisbane and overseas. He has been in custody since August of last year.
It's beyond the realms of anyone's imagination what this person did to these children. I can only say that you try not to be shocked after a long period of time in the police and crime reporting, but this is a horrific case.
The 87 Australian children who were allegedly abused, some of whom are now adults, have been identified. Their families contacted. Investigators are still trying to identify 4 other children. The most serious charges carrying a maximum sentence of life in prison. Canada is recognizing Emancipation Day today, marking the end of slavery.
It is important that while remembering the suffering of displaced Africans, that we also recognize and remember that at the same time, people indigenous to these lands were going through similar atrocities.
August 1st marks the day in 1834 when the Slavery Abolition Act came into effect across the British Empire, laying the groundwork to free about 800,000 enslaved Africans across the British colonies, including in Canada. The transatlantic slave trade caused the deaths of millions of African people and their descendants. Meta has begun removing access to news content for Canadian users of Facebook and Instagram. Meta had signaled it would do this after the federal government passed its Online News Act in June. That act compels both Meta and Google to come up with revenue-sharing deals with publishers for use of their news content. Google is also threatening to remove news links for all users in Canada by the end of this year. A new effort to help people butt out coming up. Canada's new anti-smoking campaign, unlike anything done before. A new anti-smoking measure kicked in today, and it's a first for Canada and the world. Every individual cigarette, not just the packaging, will carry a health warning printed directly on it. The government says the new regulations will make it virtually impossible to avoid the health warnings. Though, as Turia Isri reports, the popularity of vaping means it's time for a shift in strategy.
Poison in every puff. The risks of smoking will be underlined on individual cigarettes. Tobacco smoke harms children. Cigarettes cause leukemia. It's part of a first-of-its-kind anti-smoking campaign in the world.
I think the warning labels are more educational.
Tobacco use claims almost 50,000 lives a year and costs the Canadian healthcare system $16 billion annually.
Everything is a good idea as whatever we do to fight the beast of tobacco.
Canada has been a world leader in that fight since the 1960s, and the first to require warning labels on packages back in the 1980s. The hope today is that no warning will be overlooked.
It'll be there when kids experiment by, quote-unquote, borrowing a cigarette from a friend. They may not see the package, but they're going to see that warning on every cigarette.
Some smokers don't think it will work.
I'm going to come out for my 5 minutes of peace and quiet from work and have my smoke. I'm not going to read it.
Is it a good idea, or?
I guess. It's not going to stop me.
Around 10% of Canadians smoke. The government wants to cut that number in half by 2035. Warnings help, but respirologists say they're not enough.
What we could do as a community, as a society, is making the nicotine replacement therapy available for free for everybody.
While doctors want more support to help people quit, they also want more done to stop teenagers from getting hooked on something else.
Very few young people are starting to smoke. Great. We've done well with that. On the other hand, we've managed to get a whole new generation of young people addicted to nicotine vaping.
Health Canada introduced new regulations on vaping last month, requiring businesses to submit ingredient lists. But with so many of the long-term effects unknown, public health experts want those risks spelled out more clearly as well. Turia Isri, Global News, Ottawa.
A Ukrainian hospital is bombed with deadly consequences. What we've learned about the victim coming up. In western India, rescuers are searching for survivors trapped after a crane collapsed at a highway construction site. At least 16 workers are known to have died. A number of others were injured. The crane was being used to build a massive bridge 80 kilometers from Mumbai. In Ukraine, a Russian airstrike on a hospital has killed a doctor who had just started working there. The attack tore a gaping hole in the roof and injured at least 5 others. It was one of several Russian strikes on Ukraine. And for the second time in 2 days, a drone targeted Moscow, hitting the same government building damaged the last time. As Crystal Gamansing reports, these drone attacks make Russia's capital vulnerable. And a warning, some of the images in her story are graphic.
Technical issues, according to the sign posted, kept people from using the main entrance to an office tower in Moscow's central business district. The issue, a drone strike. It's the second drone strike on this Russian government building this week. The first hit was early Sunday. Ukraine has not taken responsibility, and it's not clear why this particular building is being targeted. This Russian man likened the hit to a mosquito biting a human, but he also says nowhere is 100% safe in Russia now. Russians had been previously insulated from the Kremlin's so-called special military operation in Ukraine until early May. That's when the Kremlin was hit. This man says he's from Donetsk and dismisses the attacks in Moscow, saying they're nothing compared to the daily shelling and deaths in his Ukrainian hometown. Officials in Kherson shared video from inside a hospital hit just after 11 a.m. Broken glass and bloodstains, the hallmarks of another deadly strike. The World Health Organization noted in May that it verified more than 1,000 attacks on healthcare facilities in Ukraine since the start of the full invasion, the most it has ever recorded in any humanitarian emergency. Here, a young doctor was killed and a nurse among the wounded. It was his first day at work after an internship, says the head of the Kherson Regional Administration Medical Department. The Kyiv regime, meanwhile, is being accused of terrorist attacks by Russia's defense spokesperson. The claim is that Ukraine targeted Russian civilian boats in the Black Sea with unmanned attack vessels. Russia says it destroyed them. Ukraine denies attacking civilian boats. Crystal Gamansing, Global News, London.
Driving down under next, the Australians setting an ambitious and bizarre world record. A frightening moment for the pilot of that small plane in Quebec City this morning. The Cessna appeared to stall on takeoff and plunged onto the runway. The pilot, the only person on board, has only minor injuries. Airport authorities say the plane belonged to a flight training school. NASA says it's back in contact with the Voyager 2 spacecraft. The agency says it's picked up a heartbeat signal from the probe. Voyager 2 is about 20 billion kilometers from Earth and has been exploring the universe since 1977. It stopped receiving commands or sending data after a wrong command tilted its antenna 2 degrees away from Earth. It's hurtling at an estimated 55,000 kilometers through interstellar space, but NASA says Voyager 2 is still broadcasting and is in good health. Well, now to a different kind of mission. A group of mates in Australia took on an ambitious underwater challenge. They converted an old Toyota Land Cruiser into an EV, drove it into the ocean, and cruised along the ocean floor. Mike Armstrong takes a deep dive into how and why they did it.
Good luck, fellas. If it seems like something dreamed up over drinks, well, apparently it was. To take a car nicknamed the Mud Crab and drive it into the water on one side of the harbor, hoping to come out on the other.
The world record we're going for is the furthest distance driven underwater by a car and the deepest depth driven underwater by a car.
Now, Darwin Harbour is in the Northern Territory of Australia. It's about 7 kilometres across, and at its deepest, the bottom is about 30 metres down. At that depth, there's a lot that can go wrong, or to put it another way, there's a lot to ignore.
Just got to act like it's another day in the office and just get the job done. It's really how I'm thinking about it.
The rather strange project was part of a documentary on cult cars. In this case, the 1978 Toyota Land Cruiser.
Voila! We're not going to be able to get this motor driving underwater.
Now, roadworthy and seaworthy are two completely different things. The car's diesel engine had to be removed and replaced with an electric motor. That new system then had to be housed in a submarine-style waterproof and oil-filled casing. They spent a lot of time protecting the motor from water, and much less on protecting the drivers from crocodiles and sharks.
I'm pretty sure a bright orange car coming towards a shark or a croc that they've never seen before aren't going to be hanging around at all.
This was actually the second attempt to cross Darwin Harbour. The first was 40 years ago, and it didn't quite make it. They only got about halfway.
This is like an urban myth in Darwin when they did this 40 years ago, and I grew up listening to stories, and it almost faded into mythology.
Well, that inspiration brought together a team of about 30 people and some technologies they didn't have in 1983. Seabed mapping meant they weren't just driving in the dark, although they did hit some obstacles. Now, the trip was expected to take 5 to 7 hours. Mud crab resurfaced to cheering crowds after about 12 hours. They answered the question, could they do it? The question basically left unanswered is still, why? Mike Armstrong, Global News.
That is Global National for this Tuesday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is the Sturgeon Moon, captured in Calgary, Alberta. It happens when the moon is full during the closest point in its orbit around Earth, and it appears bigger and brighter than a regular full moon. Its visibility peaks tonight, but then at the end of August, there will be a rare blue supermoon. 2 in 1 month. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Bye-bye.